We all want to feel like our lives matter. It's one of those things that seems to drive everything we do. Whether it's the career we choose, the relationships we build, or the goals we set for ourselves, there's always this underlying need purpose. But why do so many people turn to religion to find it? To understand that, we have to look at how humans operate. We're not just creatures of habit or survival, we're creatures of meaning. It's not enough for us to just exist, eat, sleep, and reproduce. We need to feel like we're part of something bigger, something that transcends the day-to-day grind. And religion, in all its forms, has historically provided that. Think about it. In every culture, in every corner of the world, people have built systems of belief that explain the world and their place in it. Religions offer answers to the big, existential questions: why are we here? What happens when we die? Is there something guiding us? People are drawn to these questions because they're wired for more than just survival. Without some overarching meaning, life can feel empty, even terrifying. But let's make this personal for a second. Imagine living in a world where nothing means anything, where you wake up, go about your day, and none of it really adds up to anything beyond the moment. That's a pretty bleak way to live, right? Religion steps in here by offering a framework, a narrative that says, your life does have meaning. You're part of a story that's been written long before you were born and will continue long after you're gone. That's powerful. It's the antidote to the fear that life is random and meaningless. I'm not saying that religion is the only way to find purpose, but for billions of people, it's the most compelling way. That's because religions don't just offer abstract ideas, they provide structure, rituals, and communities that make those ideas feel real and tangible. They give people something to hold on to when things get tough. When you're facing loss or failure or suffering, religion steps in and says, this isn't the end of the story. There's something more. There's also a deep psychological element here. Human beings thrive on certainty and security. We don't like chaos or unpredictability. Religion often provides a sense of order in a chaotic world. It gives people a sense that there's a plan, that someone or something is in control. Even if that control is beyond our understanding, it's comforting to believe that life isn't just a series of random events.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound spiritual lesson.
But let's go deeper here. Why do we need a sense of control or certainty at all? Why can't we just accept that life is unpredictable and go with it? This is where it gets interesting. The need for control isn't just about comfort. It's about survival too. Our ancestors lived in a world where uncertainty often meant danger. If you didn't know what was coming next, a storm, a predator, a rival tribe, you were at risk. So over time, humans developed a desire for patterns, for explanations, for something that made the world make sense. Religion offered that. It provided stories and systems that explained everything from why the sun rises to why people die. And those explanations helped people feel like they had some control, even in a world full of uncertainty. But it's not just about control. Religion also taps into something even more primal: our need for connection. Humans are social creatures. We need to feel like we belong to something, like we're part of a community. Religion, with its rituals, gatherings, and shared beliefs, creates a sense of belonging that's hard to replicate in other parts of life. When you're part of a religious community, you're not just an individual navigating the world alone. You're part of a group with a shared purpose and a shared destiny. This sense of community is so powerful that it can even shape your identity. For many people, their religious beliefs aren't just something they practice on weekends. It's who they are. It influences their values, their decisions, and their relationships. And that's why religion can be such a profound source of purpose. It's not just about believing in something bigger than yourself. It's about aligning your entire life with that belief and finding meaning in every part of it. Now that we've looked at why religion often gives people a sense of purpose, let's flip the script. Can you find that same sense of meaning and purpose without religion? This is where things get tricky, because for a lot of people, the answer is obvious: of course you can. There are plenty of people who live deeply fulfilled lives without adhering to any religious beliefs. But the question is, how do they do it? One way people find purpose outside of religion is through personal achievement. They set goals, they pursue careers, they work hard to leave a mark on the world. And for some, that's enough. There's something deeply satisfying about setting a goal and achieving it, whether it's building a business, mastering a skill, or creating something new. But here's the catch: what happens when you hit a wall? When you meet all your goals and still feel empty? A lot of people who chase success find themselves in this exact situation. They get to the top of their field, they make all the money, they achieve everything they set out to do. And then they realize that it's not enough. Why? Because personal achievement, while meaningful in the short term, often doesn't provide the lasting sense of purpose that people are looking for. It's like climbing a mountain, only to realize that once you're at the top, there's nothing left to climb. So what's the alternative? For some, it's relationships. They find purpose in their family, their friendships, their connections with others. And that makes sense. Humans are wired for connection, as we talked about earlier. There's something deeply fulfilling about loving and being loved, about being part of a family or community. But relationships, like personal achievements, aren't always enough. People change, relationships end, and sometimes even the deepest connections can leave you feeling isolated or unfulfilled. Then there's the idea of finding purpose through personal growth. Some people believe that life's purpose is to constantly improve, to become the best version of yourself. Whether it's through education, self-improvement, or spiritual practices outside of traditional religion, people find meaning in the pursuit of becoming better, wiser, more enlightened. But again, this raises another question: what happens when there's no more growth to be had? Or what if, despite all your efforts, you never become the person you want to be? This is where we hit a wall. Because at the heart of all these pursuits, success, relationships, personal growth, is the same desire for something bigger. Whether people acknowledge it or not, there's a hunger for transcendence, for meaning that goes beyond the tangible. And that's where, for many, religion still holds sway. Religion offers something that personal success, relationships, and self-improvement often can't: a connection to something eternal, something bigger than the self. But let's keep going. If religion offers that sense of eternity, what about people who reject it entirely? How do they deal with the big, unanswerable questions? So what happens when someone rejects religion altogether? When they decide they don't need it to answer the big questions or to find purpose in life? This is where things get even more interesting, because for many people, rejecting religion isn't just about walking away from a set of beliefs. It's about confronting the world in its rawest form without any comforting narratives, without any promises of an afterlife, without a grand design. For some, this can be incredibly liberating. Imagine the freedom of not being bound by any religious dogma or rules. You get to make your own meaning, define your own purpose, and live life on your own terms. There's a certain allure to that idea, being the master of your own fate. Instead of relying on a higher power or ancient texts, you rely on logic, reason, and personal experience to guide your way. And for a lot of people, that's enough. They find purpose in the now, in the tangible things they can see and touch. They create their own meaning through art, science, love, or just the simple act of living a good life. But here's the thing: rejecting religion doesn't necessarily mean you've solved the problem of purpose. In fact, it can leave you with even more questions. Without religion, you're faced with the stark reality that life might not have any inherent meaning. Everything might just be random. The universe might not care about you or your life. And that can be a heavy burden to carry. Think about it for a second. If there's no higher power guiding things, no afterlife waiting for us, no grand plan, then what's the point of all this? Why struggle? Why suffer? Why try to be good if, in the end, it doesn't really matter? These are the kinds of questions that can keep people up at night, and they're not easy to answer. Some people respond to this existential crisis by embracing a philosophy like existentialism or nihilism. Existentialists, like Jean-Paul Sartre and Albert Camus, argued that life doesn't come with built-in meaning, but that's precisely what makes it so valuable. It's up to each individual to create their own meaning, even in a universe that might be indifferent or absurd. In this view, meaning isn't something handed to you on a silver platter by religion or tradition. It's something you have to build for yourself, brick by brick. But that's easier said than done. If you're going to reject religion and build your own purpose, you need to answer some tough questions. What do you value most? What do you want your life to stand for? What's worth your time and effort? Especially when you know that, in the grand scheme of things, your time here is limited. These are the kinds of personal questions that don't have simple answers. And for some, the weight of having to create their own purpose can feel overwhelming. It's no coincidence that many people who reject religion still find themselves drawn to other forms of spirituality or philosophy. They might not believe in a God, but they still feel that deep need for connection, for meaning, for something bigger than themselves. Some people turn to meditation, mindfulness, or even nature as a way to tap into something transcendent. Others dedicate themselves to causes fighting for social justice, protecting the environment, or advancing scientific knowledge. These pursuits can provide a sense of purpose and fulfillment, but they still leave the biggest questions unanswered. Because at the core of it all, we're still faced with the same dilemma: what's the point of it all? Does anything we do matter in the long run? Without religion, the answers to these questions can feel elusive. Life can seem like a series of moments strung together by chance, with no greater meaning beyond what we give it. And for some, that's enough. But for others, it's not. The desire for something deeper, something transcendent, nags at them, even if they don't believe in a traditional God or religion. Let's not forget that even the staunchest atheists struggle with these questions. People like Christopher Hitchens or Richard Dawkins might have rejected religion, but they still wrestled with the idea of purpose. And that's because the need for meaning, for something bigger than ourselves, is part of what makes us human. It's not something you can easily turn off, even if you reject the religious explanations for it. But there's another side to this as well. Some people argue that rejecting religion allows you to see life in a clearer, more honest way. Without the lens of religious belief, you're forced to confront the reality of life as it is messy, unpredictable, and finite. And for some, that reality is enough. They don't need the promise of eternal life or divine purpose to find meaning in the world around them. They find beauty in the fleeting moments, in the connections they make, in the knowledge that their time here is limited, and that makes every moment precious. But again, we're left with the same question: is that enough? Can living for the moment, creating your own purpose, or finding fulfillment in human relationships really fill the void that religion so often fills for people? It's a question with no easy answers, because for every person who finds purpose outside of religion, there's another who feels lost without it. For every philosopher who argues that life is what we make of it, there's someone else who feels the weight of meaninglessness pressing down on them. And that's what makes this topic so fascinating and so deeply personal. At the end of the day, the search for purpose is something we all share, whether we're religious or not. It's the driving force behind so much of what we do, from the careers we pursue to the relationships we build to the causes we fight for. But where we find that purpose, whether in religion, in personal achievement, in our connections with others, or in something else entirely, is different for everyone. And that brings us back to the original question: why do people find a sense of purpose through religion? The answer, I think, lies in the fact that religion offers something that's hard to find anywhere else: a sense of connection to something bigger than ourselves, a sense of order in a chaotic world, and a story that explains not just where we came from, but where we're going. But the real question, the one that cuts to the heart of this entire conversation, is this: what do you believe gives life meaning? Whether that answer comes from religion or something else, it's the most important question we can ask ourselves. Because in the end, that's what we're all searching for: something that makes this whole experience of being alive worth it. One possible answer is that, in the absence of a religious story, people construct personal narratives. Instead of subscribing to a belief system imposed from the outside, they cobble together their own meaning. Maybe they find purpose in their work, in their family, in personal growth, or in contributing to society. These personal narratives can be just as powerful as religious ones, because they give people a reason to get up in the morning. They provide goals, values, and a sense of direction. But here's the tricky part: personal narratives are fragile. They can change and they can break. Think about it. What happens when your career, the thing you've built your identity around, suddenly crumbles? Or when a relationship you've invested your entire sense of self into falls apart? When these personal narratives fail, it can feel like your entire world is collapsing. And without a larger framework, without that grand narrative, it's easy to feel lost. You might start asking yourself questions like, what was all of this for? Did it even matter? This is where religion often steps in. Because religious narratives, while not immune to doubt or change, offer something more enduring. They provide a sense of purpose that isn't tied to your job, your relationships, or your personal achievements. Even when things go wrong in your life, religion tells you that there's still a larger plan at work, something that goes beyond your immediate circumstances. That's why, for so many people, religion is comforting in times of crisis. It offers a kind of emotional and existential safety net. But again, let's return to the idea of living without that grand narrative. One of the most common alternatives we see today is the focus on the now. Instead of worrying about the bigger picture, people are increasingly drawn to mindfulness, meditation, and philosophies that emphasize living in the present moment. The logic here is simple. If the future is uncertain and the grand narrative is unclear, why not just focus on what's right in front of you? Why not find meaning in the experiences of today rather than worrying about what might come later? And there's something undeniably appealing about this approach. It's practical, it's manageable, and it can be deeply fulfilling. When you're fully present, when you're immersed in the here and now, the big existential questions don't seem as pressing. The small things like a good conversation, a walk in nature, or a creative project start to feel incredibly meaningful. In fact, some would argue that this is where true meaning lies, not in some abstract religious story, but in the tangible, lived experiences of everyday life. But here's the catch: living in the now only works if you can maintain it. And that's hard. Our minds are wired to look ahead, to plan, to anticipate. We're constantly thinking about the future, worrying about what's next, and wondering how everything fits together. It's part of being human. So while focusing on the present can be a powerful tool for finding meaning, it doesn't completely eliminate the deeper questions. They have a way of creeping back in, especially during moments of crisis or loss. This might explain why, even in a largely secular world, people are still drawn to spiritual practices, even if they don't align with traditional religion. Practices like yoga, meditation, and even secular rituals around nature or creativity can fill the gap left by the absence of a grand narrative. They provide a sense of connection to something bigger, even if that something isn't a god or a set of religious beliefs. For some, it's enough to feel connected to the universe, to nature, or to the flow of life. That, in itself, can be a kind of purpose. But there's something else to consider here. What about the people who reject not just religion, but any kind of narrative at all? The hardcore nihilists, the ones who believe that life has no inherent meaning, and that trying to find purpose is a futile exercise. How do they cope? Nihilism presents a paradox. On the one hand, it strips away all the comforting stories we tell ourselves about purpose and meaning. It says, none of it matters, so why bother? But on the other hand, there's freedom in that. If nothing matters, then you're free to do whatever you want. You're not bound by any rules or expectations. You get to define your own life without the pressure of fitting into some larger story. For some people, this is liberating. They embrace the chaos of life and find joy in the fact that there's no ultimate meaning. For others, though, this can lead to a deep sense of despair. And this brings us to one of the most profound questions of all: is meaning something we discover, or is it something we create? If meaning is something to be discovered, then it exists outside of us. It's out there, waiting for us to find it, whether through religion, philosophy, or some other form of exploration. But if meaning is something we create, then it's entirely subjective. It's up to each of us to decide what matters, and there's no right or wrong answer. This is a fundamental divide in how people approach the question of purpose. For those who believe in a discoverable meaning, religion often offers the most compelling answers. It says, this is the truth, this is the purpose, and here's how you fit into it. For those who believe meaning is created, life is more of an open canvas. You get to decide what your purpose is, and that can change over time. But both approaches come with their own challenges. If you're searching for an external meaning, what happens if you never find it? And if you're creating your own meaning, what happens when your sense of purpose shifts or crumbles? At the end of the day, the question of purpose is inescapable. Whether you find it in religion, in personal achievement, in relationships in the present moment, or in the freedom of nihilism, it's something we all wrestle with. It's part of what makes us human. And while there might not be a single answer that satisfies everyone, the search for meaning, wherever it leads you, is what gives life its depth and richness. So, why do people find a sense of purpose through religion? Because it offers answers. It provides a framework, a story that makes sense of the chaos. But for those who reject it, the search for purpose doesn't end. It simply takes a different form. And maybe that's the most important thing of all, that we keep searching, keep asking, keep trying to figure out what it all means. Because in that search, we find a kind of purpose, even if the answers remain elusive. And now, here's the final question: what does purpose mean to you? Whether you find it through faith, through personal achievement, or through the simple act of living, that's a question only you can answer. But whatever your answer is, it's the thing that shapes your life in ways that are deeper than words can express.